We all want really fit hurling football teams without having to do too much isolated conditioning. But what games support the best intensities to develop fitness through them? Can we also include and develop our specific game principles and develop them through some constraints? To find inspiration from other sports, I look to soccer, where Leeds were famed for their really high intensity pressing and fitness levels while under Marcelo Bielsa. I looked into some of his approaches over the years with the various teams he worked with through this book and other articles that have been written about him. And while he used some isolated conditioning and fitness work to develop his players, he also focused in on a variation of small-sided games that he termed Murderball with a few different constraints to it. In this video, I'm going to show you a baseline game of Murderball that you can use with a couple of different adaptations on it, and then two other specific variations you can use to try and target specific elements of play within your team, some that are more suited to hurling and some that are more suited to Gaelic football. We're going to jump in and look at a baseline game. I'll give an explanation of that, a couple of different variations we can put on it based on what it is specifically we want to work on. And we'll also go into some of the work to recovery times because they're really important to get the proper adaptations in this. So we start off, this is our baseline Murderball, and I generally play this around 5v5 up to 7v7. Any more and you're not getting the right intent, any less it just becomes a little bit too hard, or it's not going to be the true effect you want based on game principles. It just becomes more of a really high intensity possession-y thing. And these will work for hurling or for football. So we start off, now this is just a simple setup I have here. I'm using a half of the pitch just to give the guideline. So it's around 80 metres by 40 metres. You can flip it endwise and have two of these pitches going on beside each other and go ever so slightly less. So this is a 7v7 including goalkeepers, so 6v6 out the field. Depending, like if you don't have goalkeepers involved in this, they're away doing more goalkeeper specific work. You can go 6v6 out the field with little small goals that don't really require goalkeepers, but for this one we'll use juvenile goals and keep the goalkeeper in there. It's goals only, and that just forces like you have to work the ball that bit up the field more and brings in like goalkeeper shot stopping. I'll generally play for 60 to 120 seconds, and I find if you play any less, it just doesn't get going. If you go any longer, there's just too much fatigue and the actual standards of play come way down. Players just drop intent to survive. I'll start around 60 seconds, but look to build that up over the course of a few weeks. And you can play a 5, realistically you could definitely start with 4, but build that up to 5 or 6 rounds of it to accumulate more time. There are two options. You can have 2 games going, and I'll show that in a second. Or if you have 3 teams, you can have 2 teams playing and one either resting, observing, or doing some ball work, and you just do a little rotation there of what happens. And just you'll see here, blue team doing an attack the way up, they get their score, straight away ball back out, orange team's attack on the way back up. I said about say if you have 3 teams, you have another one here on the side, and they're doing some isolated skills work, or you can just have them in to observe and give feedback. That can work really well too. Will help develop their game IQ a little bit, but also instead of coaches giving all the feedback, sometimes it's worth other players giving some of the feedback. And then if you have the playing numbers available, you can set up 2 pitches at the same time, and they can do a couple of rounds against each other. They can do swap over every single time, whatever you prefer. General guidelines, I would look for a 1:1 work to rest ratio. So if you're playing for a minute, you're recovering for a minute. If you're playing for 2 minutes, you can probably reduce recovery to 1 minute there again, whatever you like. I would be very strict on my recovery periods. You lose a lot of the benefit if they go too long. They're just too recovered going back into it each time. I'm also wary that some coaches will just talk for too long. Second you blow that whistle for the game to be over, start your stopwatch. And when it gets to 50 seconds, back out, ready to go. And whatever you need to say, be brief, but be purposeful, and it'll make you a little bit more succinct in your delivery of feedback as well. You can allow players to guide discussion, like orange team pulling together, blue team pulling together. You have 40 seconds. What's happening? What are you going to do about it? Keep the scores in this. So orange team, you're after winning 2 of the last 2 games. What's going to happen in the next 2? Or keep cumulative score. Or the orange team have beaten blues and greens, as have the maroon burgundy team. I want to see ultimate champions here in this little game. I'd start off around 60 seconds, 4 to 5 by 60 seconds, and build that up. You can either build up the amount of games you play, or build up, go from 60 to 90 up to, and max for likes this game 120. But you do 4 or 5 by 2 minutes will give you a lot of really high intent work. A couple of optional variations you can put in then to work on different types of game situations or systems of plays. You can vary between every restart comes from the goalkeeper, or you leave balls out at the corner flag, and once there's a score, the defender has to go and collect it and work it out. They both have different positives. You can also change it so that the keeper can only play a long ball. It must go past halfway, so it forces a little bit more fighting for a higher ball, working on breaks, just isolating 1v1 situations a little bit, which we look at in more detail the next game. Put in a shot clock to encourage, once the ball is turned over, there's a really fast transition up the field, and also encourages defenders to get back instead of sometimes a forward might be turned over and it's like, someone else has slowed up, I'll slowly make my way back up. Whereas it's just encourage a little bit more intent. You can also take goalkeepers out of it, particularly for new Gaelic football rules. You just don't want that outlet there that a player does have to take on his man or force other players to come back to give him that option. That's an option that you can dip into these styles of games as well, based on what it is you want to focus on. And you can change variation from game to game to game as well, just to force players to think a little bit differently, but also realistically here you should have the key principles you want to work on in mind and design the specific conditions or constraints you put on it around those, as opposed to just variety. The first variation I'll put on this will be the isolated 1v1s, and we'll just make a couple of slight changes to the rules and plane shape to do that. So this is our standard plane here. We're now going to split it, so we have a halfway line and you're not allowed to cross that halfway line. So you isolate, 3v3 on each side, but it tends to focus in on the specific 1v1s. Also, you're going to limit all deliveries from the keeper to be long. Once there's a score or a ball goes dead on the end line, say, the keeper isn't allowed to give it short or a give and go. It has to be a long delivery. And this will work for both hurling and football. So the couple of adaptations, no player is allowed to cross halfway. You 4v4 or 6v6, but that's isolated down to 2v2s or 3v3s. Now, if you're doing 4v4s, like full pitch 4v4, so 2v2 and 2v2, you'll need a smaller pitch than what's there. 40 by 80 will just be too long. And it isolates most of the 1v1s. Because the keeper can only play long, it's automatically dropping it somewhere in a 1v1, potentially a 2v2, but it will encourage a bit of calling and a bit of communication around who's up and who's on breaks. I like to do it that defenders cannot shoot. So say if you turn over a ball in your own half, you're not allowed to then take a shot. But sometimes that can be good, just to force forward, like, turned over and giving up. Versus if the defender can get a shot away, they can only get a shot away if they're completely free. And if you do allow them to shoot, it just forces forwards to stay switched on when the ball is turned over and try getting that little tackle there. I'd encourage goals only for that, or at least goals only from the forwards. If you are allowing defenders to shoot from their own half, then obviously they can only get points. They're not going to realistically get a goal from there. But realistically, once the defender get a ball, they are working it up to the forwards in the opposite half of the field. You can extend out the length of play that you're starting with here. So because there just is automatic inbuilt recoveries, particularly when the ball is in the other half of the field, you're not quite as switched on, you're not working back to get a pass or whatever. You can play for 90 seconds up to 3 minutes, potentially 4, although I do generally see a lot of fatigue creeping in once you go past 3 minutes. So these will be slightly longer games, you can get a little bit more out of them that way. This next variation is a little bit more hurling specific because it's looking at those shots from distance. You could adapt pitch size a little bit, include a few more players if you want to focus on that attacking arc or that 2-point arc, say in Gaelic football. Although I think you lose a little bit of the benefits of it because that works really well because there are options inside and that's why defenders stay in there. If you limit that bit of the pitch, I don't think it works as well, but you can certainly try it. So we use, now I have full pitch here, condensed in, but you can also go say half pitch and just focus it to one side, and you'll see that in the next variation. We have slightly more players here. I think it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is an 8v8. That might even be a little bit too much space, but I don't want to make the pitch any shorter because it becomes too long a distance to shoot from. Then if anything, you're going to narrow it in from the sidelines each side. Again, long ball, and you can vary it from keepers. They can either just give a 50-50 ball or they can specifically pick someone out. It just forces a little bit more switch on defending each time there's a restart. Some of the guidelines around this then, you're looking to be about 30 to 40 metres from goal based on what's a realistic shooting zone for the group you're working with. You can go narrower, but you may have to pull in juvenile goals, give them something to shoot at there. 6v6 up to 8v8. Wouldn't go past the 8v8. There's not everyone is as involved as you'd like when you go past that. full width or narrower. It's points only, obviously, from that distance, and it's to encourage the longer shooting. Again, the keeper delivery varies, either 50-50 or find their own player. Or if goalkeepers are away working on something specific themselves, you can get like an injured player or someone who's not involved in the game to do your deliveries from you. And you can vary them from the goal, the corner flag. They can also be useful either. They're short game. You can do shorter games, say 90 seconds up to 3 minutes, with really quick restarts. There should be quick, not kick. Goalkeeper has the ball ready to go. The second a shot has gotten away, keeper's restarting. Or you can go longer games, up to 5 minutes. And you just give a 5 to 8 second, right, regroup, get your positions, push up, 3, 2, 1, now a restart. That'll extend out the length of the game because there's inbuilt recovery times there. It might give a little bit more structure to what you're playing and help players just have a bit of recovery, get up on their player and keep it a little bit more 50-50 focused. Whereas there's sometimes you might have one or two, I wouldn't say passengers, but players who aren't willing to work as hard in the shorter games and the quick restarts, and the game can just break down because of that. So a lot of times I find the longer restarts and the slightly longer game will give you more of a realistic competitive benefit to what it is you're playing. Looking at a bit of an integrated approach here, so you can have a couple of games going at once. We had the 2 traditional games going on earlier, and that's a nice little tournament you can play at some stage, or use it as like an opener or a primer to a session before going into bigger games. But this blended approach will have 2 games going at once, but they're both working on slightly different things. So on the top pitch, we have our game for goals, or you can split the pitch in half, where it's the isolated 2v2s or 3v3s, which are short restarts, a lot of the 1v1s, it's goals only, and I would do this 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off, 2 to 3 rounds of that, and your limit, 7v7 is the most I'll go here, and you're probably looking at a 6v6 with 3v3 on each end. On the other pitch end is your long shooting game, so it's a long delivery from the end line. You'll probably have your goalkeepers involved in that top one with the small goals, so if you have a lot of goalkeepers, you can have 2 more who deliver in long ball, or just injured players who can deliver in a long ball. This is obviously points only, and these are the main goals if possible, if they've that shooting range. Otherwise, and you have enough juvenile goals, set them up somewhere. And I'll probably play this a bit more continuous, but give the slightly longer restart in between each dead ball. So on the top pitch, you're going 60 on, 60 off by 2 or 3, and on the bottom pitch, as you look at it here, it's a continuous game, all played overall for the same length. The game for goals is more interval based, or short interval based, whereas the long shooting game is more long interval based, but it's through the game. Probably more hurling focused, although for football you can just leave a target inside that you're trying to kick to, or put in juvenile goals as some form of a 2-point arc. That works as well. And you do, say, 2 rounds of each one there. Try some of those approaches of Murderball in your teams over the next couple of weeks. Let me know what works and what doesn't work. What variations have you put on yourself that you found really useful? If you want more support around how to use games for conditioning and developing principles of play, download the games-based conditioning guide below, or watch this video up here for more suggestions.